香港傳媒由80年代開始成為了解中國嘅窗口，到而家面對新聞自由、自主同專業嘅流失，咁新香港嘅狀況又能唔能夠向外求，寄望公道記錄現世呢？匯集全球唔同地方駐香港記者嘅香港外國記者會 FCC 近期嘅全新面貌，似乎答咗呢個問題。
點解你要跟住我咁耐啊？
點解跟住我同事呢？
今年3月，有法庭記者被跟蹤，有記者喺法院外拍攝立場案主控官被警員撞開，同用粗口鬧。明報上個月宣布尊子漫畫停刊。除咗記協，以往香港外國記者會 FCC 都會發聲明關注呢類同新聞自由有關嘅事，不過呢3次都冇出聲。佢哋今年唯一出過嘅聲明係29號星期一，關注政府拒絕多間傳媒機構採訪國家安全教育日嘅活動。呢個活動係4月15號，即係40幾日前嘅事。聲明刊出之後 ，Hong Kong Free Press 報導 ，FCC 通過新指引，發聲明前一定要徵詢法律意見，而且要同特區政府官員溝通。做過 FCC 主席嘅資深傳媒人、前港台節目主持韋安仕話：明白香港新聞界處境艱難，但呢個做法依然係荒謬。
Everything I say has to be measured against the fact that I'm talking from a place of security, whereas the people on the ground are much more vulnerable than I am to repercussions of anything that happens. But this is really absurd. I would point out that there is also a Foreign Correspondents Association in Beijing, and they don't do that. But the Hong Kong FCC does it. You know, there is a line to be drawn between being cautious and being aware of the very real threats that are made against journalists in Hong Kong and people who represent them.
FCC 啱啱改選新主席，由時尚雜誌 Tatler 嘅編輯 Lee Williamson 接替港大新聞及傳媒研究中心總監瑞海德。Lee Williamson 冇做政治社會新聞嘅經驗，佢嚟香港之前做過中國官媒聯辦傳媒旗下媒體 Time Out， 主要報導中國商機。
I understand the reason that he has become president is simply that nobody else would volunteer to do the job. So it's not a criticism of this individual who, incidentally, I don't know, I know nothing about him. There's a foreign correspondence club in Thailand. As I say, there's one in Beijing. There's one in Seoul. You look around the Asia region, let alone the rest of the world. I don't know of a single other foreign correspondence club that is not led by a foreign correspondent. So this is how considerably the FCC Hong Kong has fallen. You start to wonder, what's the point of it now?
FCC 係1943年由一班喺重慶嘅外國記者為咗抗議蔣介石領導嘅國民政府阻撓採訪而成立，之後一度搬去上海。共產黨掌權之後，1949年逃難到香港。FCC 喺香港搬過幾次會址，到1982年搬入下亞厘畢道舊牛奶公司倉庫，一直留到而家。會址設有酒吧、餐廳，多年嚟定期舉行午餐會、座談會，邀請唔同背景嘅講者同嘉賓。
When I became president, it was extremely active in this respect. We had a very wide variety of speakers, some of whom like Lee Kuan Yew from Singapore, I remember, who was invited more than once to the FCC, whose views I bitterly disagreed with. But, you know, I was very pleased to see him there because he was in a public forum. He was not shy about expressing his views. He was very forthright. But, you know, he was also open to questions, and that's what happened.
FCC 近年多次捲入爭議。2018年8月邀請香港民族黨召集人陳浩天演講，事後被前特首梁振英追擊。梁振英多次提到政府有權終止 FCC 會址嘅租約。特區政府9月宣布取締民族黨，再喺10月拒絕向 FCC 時任副主席馬海發出入境簽證。租約原定今年1月1號到期。 政府上年年尾決定容許 FCC 以市值租金續租，但租期由以往嘅7年減到3年，租約仲加入維護國家安全嘅條文。當時嘅主席瑞海德話會繼續為新聞自由發聲。續租會之後，一方面少咗發出同香港新聞自由有關嘅聲明，另一邊廂就舉辦多場與中國發展有關嘅活動。上星期六又舉辦中國紀錄片放映會同中國紅酒品酒會。FCC 事後仲話好高興有梁振英做活動嘉賓。除咗經常舉辦午餐會， FCC 另一個焦點活動係1995年起主辦嘅人權新聞獎。上年4月準備晒得獎名單後， FCC 突然宣布停辦頒獎禮，話唔想無意中犯法。有負責評審嘅成員以辭職表達不滿。事後流出嘅得獎名單入面，已經停運嘅立場新聞同眾新聞都榜上有名，其中立場攞咗9個獎。
One outlet's going to win like 9 awards, which looks bad. Number one, because it hurts the integrity of the award to have one outlet winning so many.
Yeah.
And that was because we didn't have enough entries. And number two, that specific outlet has been shut down and accused of a crime. And so it might look like we're supporting the criminal activity.
但睇返歷屆得獎名單，2013年明報攞過10個獎，2010年南華早報更加攞咗14個獎。而過往人權新聞獎亦都多次頒獎俾有案在身嘅新聞工作者。上年宣布停辦頒獎禮前，出任過多屆評審嘅前立場新聞博客歐嘉倫涉嫌串謀發布煽動刊物被捕。
One of the judges, he got arrested and charged with sedition by the police. I was like, oh, this is a perfect storm. Some people don't seem to understand. We live in Hong Kong, SAR, China. Would you do that if you were in China?
Yeah.
And if you wouldn't do it in China, why do you think you can still do it in Hong Kong?
The situation for a working journalist in Hong Kong, whether they're a foreign correspondent or a local correspondent, is very tough. I don't underestimate that. But, if you cannot do anything to defend the interests of journalists, it's a very big question as to why the FCC still exists. And I would point out that although the FCC has withdrawn from this role of defending free media in Hong Kong, that role is still very bravely and courageously, I would say, carried out by the Hong Kong Journalists Association, a much smaller organization with far fewer resources than the FCC.
作為 FCC 會員多年，韋安仕注意到 FCC 嘅轉變早喺港區國安法生效前已經出現。
And there were members of the board of the FCC who were actively suggesting that the most sensible thing for the FCC to be doing was simply to be operating as a drinking and eating club rather than an organization promoting the interests of free media. But obviously, after the introduction of national security law, those pressures became even stronger, and the FCC's response was simply to shut up altogether. More emphasis on retaining the premises of the club, which is after all leased by the government, rather than maintaining an emphasis on the purpose of the organization. And this is not a good development. I'm not without hope, but in the short term, I really can't see any grounds whatsoever for optimism. I think that it's relentlessly depressing